I'm in Somerset at World Horse Welfare's Glendaspoona farm, and today we are learning all about nutrition. What should we be feeding our horses and ponies to keep them as happy and as healthy as possible, and where to begin? My family and I own a few Highland ponies, and they are notorious for gaining weight very easily. So in my case, it's going to be what not to feed them. It's a bit of a juggling act, and I'm always questioning, am I doing the right thing? It's a vast topic to cover, which is why today I'm so delighted to be talking with internationally renowned equine nutritionist, Dr. Teresa Hollands. Let's tuck in. So Teresa, where should a horse owner start in planning a diet for their horse?
Okay, so three things I want to know about your horse, because what we need to make sure is the food that it's eating is meeting what the horse is doing and what the horse is like. So the three things I want to know for my horse is their body weight, which you can do with a weigh tape, or you can use a weigh bridge, or people will come out and do yard visits for you and bring a weigh bridge for you. And the reason I want to know that is because I need to know how much your horse needs to eat, total amount of food a day. Then I want to do a body fat index or body fat score, where I'll actually manually palpate over certain areas on the skeleton to see how many calories are sitting there, basically. Okay. And if there's too many, then we need to adjust. If it's perfect, brilliant. And if there's too little, we have to adjust. And then finally, I want to know the workload, because depending on the workload, it will depend how we put that food together, whether we give them just mostly forage or whether we're having to do a split between forages and concentrates.
Absolutely.
And then age.
Age as well, yeah. Sorry. But I suppose as well, going back to that, is that the diet, we're speaking very generally here, but diet will vary massively between a performance animal and then say just a happy hacker or a companion pony. So what should be, regardless of their age and workload, what should be the main basis of our horse's diet?
I always have the 4 Fs. Forage should be the foundation forever.
Forage should be the foundation forever. I'll remember that now.
It doesn't matter what type of horse we're feeding, forage should be the foundation of that diet, because horses are designed to chew.
Yep.
And they chew forages much more than they would a concentrate, and that produces saliva, which keeps the top end of their gut healthy. And then they've got little bugs in their hind gut, and the only thing that keeps them healthy are plant cell walls, which are only found in forages. So they need the plant cell walls in the forages, and that's why we have to feed forage.
I see. So am I right in thinking that saliva actually protects the lining of the stomach?
Yeah, so basically our horse's stomach you can divide into two, upper and lower. And the lower bit's like ours, it's really acidic, so it's got an acidity of 2, which is low. And then the top part, I always say to people, it's a bit like a cow's stomach. It's quite neutral, and it has no special lining. So the way it protects itself is through the saliva, which is full of bicarb ions, and that keeps it neutralised. So if you're trotting a horse, for instance, or cantering more likely, then what happens is the acid from the lower part of the stomach will come up into the top part. Unless there's some saliva in there, then that's how you get your ulcers. But the saliva will help buffer that acidity, so that keeps your top part, you're right, totally right, the top half of the stomach healthy.
I think it's good to touch on ulcers very quickly, because are they a nutrition-based issue?
Good question. So some people will say it's purely nutritional, but it's not just what the horse is eating, but it's the way we manage that eating. So the important thing to remember is our horses are trickle feeders, so they actually, unlike ourselves, we produce acid only when the stomach distends and when we have some other signals coming in through our brain. Our horses produce acid all the time. Oh, really? Okay. So if we only feed them twice a day, then the acid is still going, but there's no saliva doing the buffering. So Pony Club, little and often. So we need to be feeding frequently, so in order that the saliva is being produced frequently. That's the important thing. And obviously if we were doing that just with concentrates, A, the horses don't chew them as much as forage, and B, they eat them too quickly and they get too fat. So it does need to be a forage-based diet.
So my family and I have got a few Highland ponies, and they are notorious for gaining weight very easily. So the hay that I try to buy for them, I try and buy like second cut or slightly older. It's still very good quality, obviously dust free and mold free, but it doesn't matter that it's maybe not as high quality as other hays. What is the importance of getting our hay tested or our forage tested?
Okay. I think there's some really good things that we should know as horse owners, which is, as you've already picked out, that when grass is cut earlier in the year, it's not as old and therefore there's more nutrition in it. And I always say as grass ages, so as it gets higher and through the season and you cut it later, then it's unfortunately like the rest of us that age, it gets a bit stiffer and all the rest of it. And that stiffness is from this thing called lignin, and our horses' bacteria can't break that down.
Okay.
So horses will chew and they'll get some goodness out of it, but not as much. So that's the best sort of hay, as you said, your second cut for your Highlands. I'd go one further probably and say, have you considered straw, and maybe oat or barley straw, because that's lower again, because it's older again.
Okay, and it's safe to feed straw?
It is, yeah. There's a couple of things you need to be acutely aware of. Is A, you've got to keep dental work up, because it's harder for them to chew. And secondly, I would always keep an eye on the fibre length coming through in your horse's droppings. We're used to looking at consistency, but look at fibre length, and you want it less than about 4 millimetres.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
If it starts getting longer than that, the processing's not happening either with the teeth or further down the gut. We would avoid it for horses that are in all the time, because they get gut stasis and therefore it doesn't move through as easily. But yeah, it's been, and there's a good evidence about how it actually contributes to some reasonable weight loss or fat loss, if that's what you're trying to achieve, definitely. Yeah. So actually, sorry, I've gone off the point because you asked me, should you get it analysed?
No, that's fine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, carry on. Keep talking.
Well, I always say to people, what we have to remember is our hay is grass that's cut from a field, and it will vary across that field. So if you know you're getting, I say, a ton of food in or hay in, and it's from one field, then yeah, definitely worth having it analysed. But if you unfortunately don't have the storage space and you buy 5 bales in one week and then another 5 bales maybe from somewhere else, then it really isn't worth it. But what you can do is go onto websites and they will give you the average hay for this particular year.
Oh, that's really good to know, that you can look
so.
online for that
Definitely.
sort of information.
And that will just give you enough info, I think, to be fair.
Do you have any tips on feeding forage?
Yeah, so I mean, what we're trying to do all the time, isn't it, is to keep our horses as natural as possible. So I always find it fascinating that as horse owners we want to feed in hay nets. I do understand the safety aspects of why we might, because we don't necessarily want horses out in the field barging each other, and we want to save the forage so it doesn't get a mess. If you think about a horse with its head up in the air, it's like this. They're designed to drop their heads, and when they do that, their lower jaw drops, and that allows this really good lateral movement. That is what we're after. That's bad English, but I'm sure everybody understands what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
But when we're up here, we can't do this. So I would always, like to sit fed at relatively floor level, which then, of course, leads me on to something else, which, what happens if I'm soaking hay, which you can't do. And you see so many clever things now where people divide off a corner of a stable and put a grid over the top, or that there's hay feeders.
Or hay bell type things,
exactly.
or hay boxes.
Yeah, exactly. So if we can keep it more the natural height, I think that's very sensible.
So that's key, to try and keep them in that natural grazing stance with their head down.
Yeah.
Because I think there is something as well as for a stress release as well. They want to keep their heads down. If their heads are up all the time, then that's obviously quite a flight response. So that's coming back into trying to keep them as natural as possible.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the other thing to think about is they are foragers. And therefore, if we give them one option only, again, that's not giving them the chance to do. So if you're going to give them, I don't know, let's say 8 kilos of hay a day, what about putting 4 hay nets up with 2 kilos in each around the stable if you're keeping them in? Yeah. So they move around.
Yeah, and they've got to kind of find it and look for it a bit rather than just stood in one place all the time.
Yeah.
And so moving on from talking about forage, what other things should we be feeding our horses? Everybody these days talks about balancers, but could you tell me a bit about what they are, and are they important?
Yes, and yes. So I find it's quite clever we call a certain type of feed we put in a bucket a balancer, because to me everything that we add on top of forage is only ever to balance deficiency in the forage. Yeah. So most forages, if we're talking a leisure horse for instance, will give the leisure horse enough calories even if they're in light work. Okay. But depends on the time of year. The type of year we have had, but usually that hay won't have enough good quality protein. It'll have a nice percentage, but the quality won't be very good. So we're looking, and that's why you quite often get horses with a slightly dull coat and perhaps poor feet, because they're not getting the protein they need. And then the other thing, particularly if you're soaking your hay, they're not going to get bits and mins.
Right, okay.
So if I've got a horse that's a good doer like your Highlands, then I would buy what people call a balancer, because that's designed to be fed at, sorry about the numbers, 100 grams per 100 kilo body weight. So if your Highlands are what, 500 kilos, maybe more?
Hopefully.
I was being polite. So they would have 500 grams of that.
Daily.
Yes, and weigh it out because it's a small amount. If you had a pony, I don't know, that's doing pony club and is normal, if I'm allowed to use that word, i.e. it's not putting weight on or fat on and it's not losing fat, then they may be on a leisure type product, and that would be fed at something like, about 3 times the quantity, so between 300 to 400 grams per 100 kilo body weight.
Oh, quite a bit more.
Yes, but what you're doing is you're still giving the vitamins and minerals and the protein, it's just the calorie wrapper's different. So if you then go to the other extreme, I don't know, your performance horse for instance, where some people will argue you can compete on a horse on just forage. I personally, in my own opinion, haven't found that. But there is some research that suggests you can. So people will need to give them some additional calories because you don't get enough from the forage. And quite often if they're working hard, they need a lot more. So those sorts of feeds are designed to be fed at 600 to 800 grams per 100 kilo body weight, so 6 to 8 times more than the balancer. And again, slightly different performance horse because they will have a different type of vitamin and mineral and protein in it because they need it for the work, but it's the calorie wrapper as well. So they all balance forage, but they give the horse different amounts of calories.
I'll remember that now because I've never thought about it as being like a balance, trying to reach that balance. I've always thought it's a bit of a silly name, a balancer. What does that really mean?
Yeah.
So that's just because the forage in the UK is not balanced, so it's bringing that level back up to where it should be.
And to be fair, most forage isn't for what we do with our horses. So again, as I said, it gives them enough calories, but don't forget our horses aren't travelling 45 miles a day finding all these different types of forages. We have them in small areas with monoculture type forages, so not much to choose from. So yeah, we have to balance it back up again.
You touched on there about soaking hay.
Yeah.
Could you expand a little bit more on that, and we can maybe talk a bit about weight management?
Yeah, of course. So going back to what I want to know about your horse, I want to know how much it weighs because I want it to always be able to eat if it wants the option. If I bring it down to 1% of its body weight, it gets hungry. It's likely to get stereotypy behaviour. It's likely to get gastric ulcers. It might even get colic. And some research has shown that it actually eats its equivalent weight to bring it back up to 2.5% if it's on shavings bed with the shavings. Yeah,
oh, really?
Yeah, 250 kilo pony was eating 3 black bucketfuls of shavings. So my argument is, if I want to lose weight, nobody tells me to cut back on the total quantity of food I eat. They say control your calories.
Okay.
So if I eat 1.5% of my body weight, not that I'm saying that's what we should do for our horses, of carrot cake, which is about 6 slices, and then I do the equivalent of spinach, which is about 6 big bowlfuls. That's the same weight, but one of them is going to give me masses of more calories than the other one. So why did we have this fixation about quantity for horses? So my argument is keep the bulk up, bring the calories down. And
so
that's bringing you back to what you're asking me. Sorry, I went off there.
No,
it's
so
soaking hay.
Bulk up, calories down.
Yeah, so I say soak your hay, because that means you can still give the same amount to keep them happy, keep that all at 2.5%, but I'm bringing the calories right down because it can halve the amount of calories.
Really?
That's
and
in that hay.
How long should we be soaking it for?
Well, there's quite a lot of different evidence out there. Is it hot water? Is it cold water? It depends what you start with. But I would generally say at least overnight. And if you can get up to 12 hours, that's even better.
12 hours. And is that like a minimum or?
Well, I think we have to be realistic because, a lot of people will come in the evenings after work. You can put the hay in the water then, and then you need to use it the next morning. So that I would say was your minimum, really. Some people argue that you shouldn't rely on that because if you had a hay with very high sugar, yes, it might halve it, but it still doesn't bring it down low enough, which is a fair comment. But if you're being careful as a monitoring with your horse, if you're doing your fat scoring, you'll notice that they're not losing fat, or they're not, or they are, whichever way around it is, and then you may well could go the next stage where you replace some of that soaked hay with the straw we were talking about earlier.
I see. Now, one of the problems I have is that my Highland ponies are just out on grass all the time. We don't have a facility to bring them in off of the grass, which I know is a very useful tool. Do you have any advice for horse owners who are struggling with their horse's weight but don't have the facilities to take them off of the grass? What management tips could you give us?
Okay, do you see, that's a really interesting thing actually. If we want to lose weight, do we go to bed?
No.
But that's what we do with our horses. We bring them out of an area where they can be active and put them into bed, where they don't move around. And I bet we rug them as well. And we give them food.
I suppose my thinking with that is that then they're not eating the grass all the time.
No,
but do they just then go out and gorge? Say, for instance, you're bringing them in during the day when I know the sugar in the grass is at its peak, and putting them back out at night time. Is there a benefit for that, or do they just go out and eat twice as much, that they would anyway?
So it's been a lot of work on that, and you have to read the papers really carefully, because if you turn your pony out or horse out for 3 hours, yes, they will compensate. If you turn them out for the 12 hours, they then start to regulate again. So over the 12-hour period, plus the stuff you give them in the stable, they eat about 2.5% of their body weight. But in those first 3 hours, they might eat nearly 1 to 1.5% of their body weight.
As soon as they go back out.
Yeah. So people say don't turn them out for a short period of time, which I would agree with actually. They should be out, but think about muzzles.
Yeah.
We've shown that cortisol does not go sky high with it. There'll always be one, but you can't put it on. Secondly, I know there's a rule where we say we should only have so many horses per area, but over pressurise it. Put more horses on it, because then there's less grass for each one of them. A lot of people use tracks these days, which I think are brilliant because that keeps them moving as well. And then it's a bit more difficult, I think, to do mixed grazing, but that's what we used to do.
Yeah.
And then what else haven't I done? Oh, cut the grass. So if you've got a field with a lot of grass in and you don't want your horse to eat it, and you haven't got any companions, go out and cut it. But of course, we have to get rid of the grass cutting.
You have to lift the grass cuttings.
Yes, you need a picker-upper on the back so it's not there. But if the grass isn't there, the horse can't eat it.
Is it true that the longer, older grass has got less sugar in it than the really short grass? It's such a juggling act, because obviously you're then increasing the volume if you put them on the longer grass. Yeah. But does it have less sugar in it than the new grass that's growing all the time as they're munching away?
That's a brilliant question. And there's a lot of debate about it, and people might say, I don't agree with you, Teresa, but I always say go back to the basics. So go back to school biology and think about how a grass lives and breathes. So photosynthesis. So my grass needs water, warmth and sunlight. It gets all of those together and it makes sugars, which feeds it, which allows it to grow. So if we manage our pasture, I've got the sunlight, I've got X and Y, and my grass starts to grow. Well, it can only grow because it's using the sugar up.
Right, okay.
So if you actively manage your pasture so you keep it short, whether that's with the horse or whether it's you go in and cut it, it's going to make sugar, use sugar, make sugar, use sugar, make sugar, use sugar. So actually that grass has less sugar in than one that you allow to grow right up, because as it grows, it slows down its growth and it starts to store some of those sugars because it can't use it all up.
So that grass then has more sugar in it.
But then as I get taller, I have to put this extra stuff in my cell wall to help me stand upright, which is the lignin. And then if I do that, then it's harder for the bacteria in my horse's hindgut to actually get that food out. So to me, it's both quality and quantity. And then of course, if you go a bit further, if you allow the grass to get sufficiently mature, what do you get? Seed heads. What are seeds full of? Starch.
Sugar.
Yeah, which is broken down to sugar, but starch is harder for our horses to break down than the instant sugar that they can take out through their small intestine. So I'm sorry, I haven't given you an easy answer, but I think the most important thing as horse owners is that we manage our pasture. If we can keep it actively growing, but not excessive, so there's too much there for the horse, then it will use that sugar up.
It will use that sugar up. And finally, just to summarise, the 4 Fs, they are?
So there's different ways of saying, but forage should be the foundation of every feed programme.
Forage should be the foundation of every feed programme. Thank you so much, Teresa.
Pleasure.
Teresa has given us a brilliant overview and insight of how we should be managing our horse's diet. What I would like to know is a little bit more about the types of feed that are used in the rehabilitation of the horses and ponies that come into the care of World Horse Welfare. I'm off just now to have a chat with Jane from Bailey's Horse Feeds. So Jane, we're here today at World Horse Welfare's Hall Farm, and I know that all of the World Horse Welfare Centres are very generously supported by Bailey's. Would you mind telling me a little bit about the products that you supply to the farms?
Well, it's very much what each farm requires. So they're very much used to, they know the sorts of horses that they tend to get in and they have at the time. So they've got a really broad range to choose from. And I think I would say probably the staple for most of them will be the low-cal balancer, because actually a lot of the horses and ponies that come in tend to be good doers, and many indeed are often overweight. So they don't need anything that's going to supply calories like a mix or a cube, but they do need those essential nutrients that we know are lacking in the pasture and in the forage all over the country, because we at Bailey's do quite a lot of forage analysis. And over the years, we've collated all those results, and we really see a trend that shows that there are minerals and protein often are lacking in a forage-only diet. And these are important nutrients, whatever your horse or pony is doing. So even those that are at rest, all those nutrients are helping hoof growth and metabolism and general health and well-being. So that'll be a real key stable for all the farms. And then obviously they will have pregnant mares or mares and foals coming in, and again on that theme, so that they would be looking at stud balancer and perhaps the stud mix or cubes that provide some more calories for certainly for the lactating mares and so on. And then when there are horses that are perhaps needing to gain or maintain condition, we've got quite a range to choose from there as well. So probably our staple would be something like top-line conditioning cubes. But for those who perhaps need something that's a little lower in starch, a little bit less likely to upset the stressy ones, or perhaps any that are a bit prone to gastric ulcers, we'd turn to Ease and Excel, so Ease and Excel mix and cube. So we've got quite a choice, and I know that, those are the sorts of key products they would turn to.
I see. So you mentioned about balancers there, and we've learned a lot about the importance of feeding a really good balancer in your horse's diet.
Yeah.
With the balancer that you've got here, what is in that? What makes up the balancer, the low-cal balancer?
So it's basically protein, vitamins and minerals. So your good quality protein supplies amino acid building blocks for your muscle and body tissue. And it's really important because whilst forages do have a protein content, it's not always providing those essential amino acids that the horses and ponies need just to maintain health and condition. So quality protein and vitamins and minerals and antioxidants, again, which are supporting all their body functions, healthy hoof growth, skin, coat, teeth, and all without unwanted calories, and that's the key with a balancer.
Yes, me and my family have got Highland ponies, so it's always the struggle is trying to make sure that all of their mineral and vitamin requirements are met, but also we don't need any extra calories.
No, exactly, and certainly things like low-cal. I mean, you literally feed them by the mugful, don't you? So there's a lot of nutrients packed into a small volume, but actually really without a calorie content to worry about.
And would you mind chatting a little bit about the partnership that Bailey's has with World Horse Welfare?
Yes, of course. So we supply feed to all the rehoming farms, and we actually, obviously, when we first got together, we spent quite a lot of time going through the range and discussing, what would be suitable, so that everyone on the farms has a full understanding of all the feeds. And obviously, everybody's very experienced in feeding and the sorts of horses and ponies they get in. So it was kind of just making sure they had an understanding of, what they needed and what they would look for within the range. But it's certainly something very much that we were and have enjoyed and we're very excited about as well, because obviously, it's a cause close to every horse lover's heart, I would say, is making sure that, you know, suffering horses and ponies are, you know, given a second chance and looked after well and given a chance for a new home, and then all the other important work that World Horse Welfare does. So those sorts of things really marry in with us, and also obviously this very series about educating the horse owner. And from our point of view, that was a really, you know, important part of the partnership, was being able to work with World Horse Welfare to educate the horse and pony owner on nutrition in particular, but also just that they can, you know, they can make an informed choice for their own horse and pony.
Oh, absolutely. And where can we find out all about the feeds that Bailey supplies?
So obviously on our website, easy to find, baileyshhorsefeeds.co.uk, and we're also quite active on social media and TikTok, and we try to make a really good balance there with educational content as well as obviously fun stuff as well. But yeah, we've got a whole mine of information on the website. There's nutrition articles. There's also something called the Feed Finder, which is quite a unique tool that you can go on to, and it asks you a series of questions. You do need just to have a few minutes of time to kind of work through it, but it asks you questions about your horse, their age and their body condition and workload and so on. But it will then give you a feed recommendation at the end, and also tell you how much to feed according to your own horse and pony's body weight. So that's a really helpful tool if you just want a sort of quick ready recno and just to see what we might suggest. But of course we've always got our nutritional helpline and our nutrition team who are able to talk things through and even come out to yards as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jane.
You're welcome.
Equine nutrition is such a huge topic, and I feel like I could have spoken with Teresa all day long. First and foremost, I think it's key to remember that forage is key. It should be making up the majority of our horse's diet. I know, especially with owning Highland ponies, how difficult it is to keep our ponies' weight down. It can be a constant battle. So in the description below, we've linked a whole host of resources and advice offering great tips on weight management. If you found this episode enjoyable, please like and let us know in the comments below what you learnt today, and let's keep the conversation around equine nutrition going. If you'd like to subscribe, please click the subscribe button below and click the bell button in order to get notified of the next video in this series. I really hope that you found today's episode enjoyable. Please follow the link up here to watch another video in the series. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.